Hello, welcome to the first edition of the Conférence pour le Brésil. Antes de começar, gostaríamos de lembrar ao nosso público que o painel com áudio ao vivo em português está disponível em nosso canal no YouTube. My name is Susanna Barbary, and I am a Master in Human Rights, and I am part of the Partnership and Finance team at the Conférence pour le Brésil. On behalf of the organizing team, I would like to thank everyone for attending our panel on environmental responsibility. This conference is organized by Science Po Paris students and alumni, and its central theme is overcoming inequality. 10 years for the Sustainable Development Goals. There will be 13 panels and more than 50 speakers distributed over 7 weeks. In addition to the relentless and voluntary work of our team, we thank our partners to the Suitable Foundation, the Political Observatory, Latin America Science Po, Educalibres, and Headline for allowing us to create a free online event with the simultaneous translation into English, Portuguese, and Brazilian Sign Language. Before we start with today's panel, I would like to take this opportunity to invite everyone to participate in our next meeting on November 10th, 3 p.m. Brazil time, in which we will debate education with the participation of Marlova Noleto, Director and Representative of UNESCO, Gina Vieira, Professor of Basic Education, Priscila Cruz, the Executive President of Todos pela Educação, José Henrique Paim Fernandes, our former Ministry of Education under the moderation of Ana Penido, a journalist and educational specialist. I would like to thank all the panelists and moderators who voluntarily participate in the debate and make this event possible. And now, Ana Carolina Peliz will have the floor, and she will introduce the theme of today's panel and introduce our honorable guests. Thank you. Thank you, Susanna. Good morning or good afternoon to everyone. My name is Ana Carolina Peliz, and I am a journalist, and I hold a PhD from the Paris Sorbonne University, University in Paris. It's an honor to be able to mediate such sensitive debate and with so much paradigm, talking about the environment with so important people in the field. I'd like to thank everyone who is watching. You can take part of this. Post your questions and comments on social media, whether you were on either of the social medias. Just post your questions. Considering there is a paradigm in this theme, I can mention a good example that that may represent this paradigm is this theme, which is overcoming inequalities, and 10 years to the Sustainable Development Goals. The idea of Sustainable Development Goals was created to bring responses to environmental themes, for example, and to bring awareness to the finite resources of the environment. And with so many panels on this, discussing in education and sustainability, we are looking for answers to questions that are vast and encompass many themes. Everyone who take part in this conference in either of the panels, they are always talking about ecology and sustainability in a way. The idea of sustainability that was first presented in 1987 by a UN report, fulfilling our needs also includes the needs of the future generations. And this means that the fight of inequality cannot be translated into the acceleration of environment degradation, but it has to create possibilities of fairer and long-lasting development. The sustainable development is a central part in Brazilian politics, especially internationally. Brazil has been an important actor on the since ECO 92 with the definition of policies, and with Rio Plus 20 in the first decade of the years 2000. Brazil reduced fire the Amazon and reduced poverty and inequality. But the scenario now is different. We haven't been that far from reaching our goals as we are now. We see the dismantling of environmental policies that took ages to be put in place, the destruction of our biome with a lot of greed for immediate results and social inequality. This is a dissociation of the tendencies we see all over the world. The relationship between man and nature encompasses uh, the expectancy of a real dialogue between the parties. This goes against our species because we are destroying our biome today. In the future, we are going to lack resources with a very sad scenario for the environment in Brazil. I'd like to introduce our panelists today, and I am already giving them the difficult task of bringing us some hope. I have the honor to welcome the former Minister of the Environment in Brazil. Her story is mixed with Brazil's stories and fight with the environment. She's been fighting for 30 years for social justice and sustainable development in Brazil. She led. She has been a representative in the House of Representatives in Brazil. She has been awarded many prizes and awards. In, and she was named as one of the 50 persons who can actually save the planet. So I also have the honor to host our state representative Alessandro Malone. He was elected the best state representative by Congresso em Foco. He is one of the highlights when environmental fight is concerned and the preservation of biome. And he has a bill that deals with the emergency on the environment in Brazil. He is a professor at the Pontifical Catholic University of Rio. So welcome, Molon. We also have the honor to receive here with us Yann Laurans. He's the director of the Biodiversity program at IDDRI. His activities are concentrated on economics and biodiversity policy making. As a specialist, he was part of the negotiation CBD and also a researcher and professor at Sciences Po. Welcome, Yann Laurent. Without further ado, I'll hand the floor to the panelists. Let me start with the state representative, Alessandro Malone. You are one of the first promoters of the idea of investment in a way to leverage economy. Well, as I'm talking about bringing hope in this panel, could you please tell us what is the role of the House of Representatives when concerning the promotion of this, concerning the environment?
I'd like to start say hello to all of you and thanking the organization of this event for the invitation. It's an honor and a pleasure to be next to Minister Marina Silva and Professor Laurans. I want to say hello to all of you and say that I'm very happy to be with you this morning. I want to thank the honor given to me by the students of Science School. As you properly introduced us, we're here to think of the environmental responsibility we all have and about sustainable development. This theme cannot be dissociated from the whole theme of the conference, of the cycle of conference, which is development, sustainable development. Environment and inequalities are themes that are very deeply connected. According to IPCC, the poorer countries will be the ones most affected by the climate changes. And the populations that are poorer will be the ones that are the ones more affected in this country. So debating the environment is also debating inequalities. The scenario you will have around the world is very worrisome all around the world. Regarding inequalities, the deregulation of the global economy that gained momentum in the 80s with Reagan and Thatcher promoted inequalities within the countries. The growing automation and new technologies were not accompanied by public policies, and that affected the workforce with precarious jobs. The signs of climate changes caused by human actions are clearer in the last decades. Some hope that would come from the United Nations framework on climate change has dispersed because many countries have abandoned their commitment in the beginning of this century. 2015 brought some new hope by the Paris Agreement, but the greatest economy in the world has abandoned it, and that has affected the possibility. The cover of ice in the Arctic has been reducing. Changes in the rain patterns have affected agriculture. Storms and uh, hurricanes have been increased, and we have a very serious and worrisome scenario that requires nations to go into actions. The COVID-19 pandemic reflected even more clearly the responsibility or the disregard for science by some of the global leaders. Some, when we need them most, the challenge in the climate area is bringing some changes due to the results of the American elections the, recently. One of the actors, uh, the one of the actors in this process, the United States, will probably change with the election of the new president. And this is a move that has happened in Europe too. Brazil has a very important role in this process. Despite the history with an energy matrix that is clean, the current governor of Brazil, he has a very irresponsible and negationist position in this area and other areas also. They ignore the importance of the power transition and are very irresponsible regarding deforestation and fires in many areas of Brazil. And the president of Petrobras, which is a state Brazilian government company responsible for oil and gas, the idea of investing in renewable energy, that they were investing in renewable energy and now are no longer doing that because they don't seem to understand the world. Sheikh Yamani of years ago said that the Stone Age didn't end because of the end of stones, but the age of oil and gas will end way earlier, way before the oil is extincted around the world. And the government in Brazil doesn't seem to understand that. The position of the current position of the current government in Brazil, it's alarming. Inequality is not part of the agenda. And in the beginning of the pandemic, in March and February, March this year, when we wanted to debate how to mitigate the effects of the pandemics for the workers, the government wanted to promote the extinction of contracts with any protection for the workers and wanted to give some allowance for help with a very low value. This is the position of our government, and many other governments don't seem to understand how serious the situation is, and they seem to be moving in the opposite direction of the one we should be moving. Despite this being a terrible, a very difficult challenge, we think we can change that. Let's talk a little bit about hope. Bruno Latour, a professor from Sciences Po, he says that if Brazil finds a solution for itself, Brazil will save the rest of the world. We can build a solution for Brazil and try to build a sustainable path for the world. And this solution has to go through a new social pact around a green economy, new Green Deal, whatever name you give it, will have to go through three main pillars: growth and productivity, designing the position of the state to incorporate innovation and technology into the industry and services, and go back to a productivity growth with knowledge and know what raw materials without any value, as we usually do in Brazil. Second pillar, social justice, expanding the social protection for Brazilian workers to guarantee some revenues for them, associating that to the new technologies and bringing security for these workers. And third, environmental sustainability, redefining the relationship with the environment, disassociating this from deforestation and associating it to protection to the environment. Brazil has a duty to lead this with an environment as big as ours. Related to growth and productivity, we have to divide the gains of productivity with the society as a whole and not with the inventors of the modern technologies. Let's think, for example, from what we see by houses being built with 3D printers and vehicles without drivers. So this, in one side, will bring gains in productivity to some sectors, but might generate unemployment and poverty on the other side. We have to learn to distribute the gains brought by these new technologies. The second pillar regarding social justice has to do with measures we need to take to create a social protection network for these workers during this period and try to reduce economic inequalities when there's no proper regulation for the market. One of the more evident measures the Congress refuses to debate here in Brazil is tax reform. When you say that taxation is heavy in Brazil, they don't mention who it's heavy to. It falls on the shoulders of the middle class and the poverty affected classes. When you think about transforming that, it means to ensure environmental changes. We need to talk about climate change. If we don't do that, we'll move towards a catastrophe of global proportions. And despite the responsibility, we have to see that this is due to the richer classes behavior. Recently, I have proposed a bill to acknowledge the climate emergency in Brazil. We want to call the attention for the need for urgent actions. The proposal defines a goal to neutralize emissions in Brazil by 2050, and it prohibits the blocking of budget resources to face deforestation, which in Brazil, contrary to the rest of the world, it's a very important part in the greenhouse gas emissions here. I want to mention the important participation of Ministra Marina Silva in reducing deforestation and emissions, and all honors given to her in this area will always be few because he has done a very important work as the Ministry for the Environment. Brazil has to go back to reducing deforestation, investing in low carbon production, ensuring food for the population, and protecting the biomes in Brazil. We need to use our extraordinary biodiversity in our territory to create new products that might generate jobs, increase in revenues in many areas, and the development of new medications and treatment. I'm just mentioning one example. For example, the ucuba tree that was used to produce low quality wood products, and which was about to be extinct. But a Brazilian company that believes in sustainability and in the environment created a series of greater value products from this tree. And by spreading the revenues that come from this tree and distributing it among the communities that work with it, has improved the social situation in the area. So it is possible to create a new model that generates social justice, economic and environmental sustainability. The international scenario is challenging, but we need urgent actions to face inequalities. But there are solutions, they are close at hand, but we need to defend science, give science and empathy space so it can prevail in our planet. Thank you very much. Thank you, Deputy Alessandro Malone. You've mentioned a lot of things, and it's interesting to see how this, with taxation changes and reforms, these are all issues related to the environment. And it's interesting to see how these can affect the growth of productivity in Brazil. Now I want to pass the floor to Mr. Marina Silva. You talked about a probable victory of Joe Biden in the United States, and that will probably bring some reorganization and world leadership. And we know that climate change is a way the countries used to impose their leadership in Brazil. Brazil has participated and has been a leader in this area for some time. And do you think that we can dream of going back to this leadership?
Good morning, everyone. I thank you for the invitation, for being able to take part of this with all of you, with Anna and the organizers, uh, uh, and Molon, who presented a brilliant speech. I think Brazil has everything it takes to be the leader, but it happens in three pathways with an international scenario, expecting Biden's victory. and also in the context of our internal policies. Because regardless of the international context, we could have been doing much more, and actually we are doing nothing that could have been done. I would like to use this suggestion for this debate, the one that you've given us, which is important from my point of view, and considering the social inequalities within the sustainable goals, as we are reaching the limit for that goal, and the theme of environmental responsibility and sustainable development. I'm going to be more generalist, and then I am going to be more specific further in this talk in alignment with the agenda Molon has just mentioned, considering the Brazilian reality. First of all, when we think of sustainability, from my understanding and from my perspective, the model of sustainable development, for it to be sustainable, it is supposed that systemically the economic, social, and political and ethical sides of it, and even aesthetics, are all together. There's no way we can separate these. This cannot be just be an item on a list, an isolated thing. The model of a sustainable development supposes a, a model that is actually sustainable. When we think of changing that model, we don't stop to think of nature and the magnitude of the criticism we are uh, making to the current model. Many reports have shown that the resources are finite, and we have to consider this and consider the planet and treat the planet as a sustainable environment, and the life on Earth has to be considered, and this has to be considered by all countries. The current model is not sustainable from the political perspective, from the environment, cultural point of view, and even aesthetical, and above all, not sustainable from a political and ethical point of view. And the directives have been presented. What we need is ethics and ethical commitment, and we need to turn this into public policies with the proper scale, so that we can go from the current model to a really sustainable model. And another thing I'd like to say is that sustainability is not only a way of doing things. Of course, it is also that. It is going to translate into way of doing things economically and in other aspects. But this is an ideal of life. It supposes a new paradigm, a new way of ourselves in relationship to with each other, and it is expected that it includes the way of consuming, the way of being happy, and this all has to do of thinking of a sustainable development for the future, and considering the challenge of how this has to be translated into and how this has to be thought of, is that we need a diagnosis. This debate happens within a greater crisis. It is a civilization crisis. This is not something specifically for this time. This is something much bigger. It's a crisis of value and social crisis as well. And this is going to translate into the civilization itself. And in the context we live in, the role of Brazil is important. We are an environmental power. We have 11% of the water in the country, in the world. We have 22% of the living species on Earth. We are on the top of the hierarchy of the 17 most diverse countries in the world. With so much environmental assets, we are living a contradiction here. What is our contradiction? We are at the same time the great hope for a change in the development model. We should lead by example. And at the time, we are a threat. We are the great hope. Just the same way Molon mentioned hope, I am going to continue with this hope approach. The world needs to transit itself through a sustainable model, and the challenge is to create a new cycle of prosperity. And in this cycle of prosperity, we will have to avoid the unwished outcomes and work for the desired outcomes. We have the challenge of continuing, but in another pattern, being economically prosperous and socially fair for the unacceptable problem of social inequality. We need to be environmentally sustainable and diverse and, above all, politically democratic. Because it sustainability dilemma has a political dimension and a political a dilemma of strategic position. It's just unimaginable to consider a sustainable environment model without democracy. Democracy is in crisis, and it's fundamental for us to uh, reach that goal. With this new cycle of prosperity that the world is in need of, Brazil plays an important role. And with this ambiguity and with this contradiction, at the same time, it is difficult to see because we need to lead by example, but at the same time, we are a country that is a threat. How can we be the country that can lead by example? With all the assets we have more things to add with. We have traditional knowledge related to natural resources, which is the baseline of knowledge that can add to the scientific and technical knowledge to create new paradigms on how to create a way of wisely use natural resources. We have lots of sources of energy that are renewable, clean, and can be distributed, and with the possibility of generating millions and millions of work. We have an energy matrix that is clean using the biomass and even the ocean, as many of the researchers have pointed out. We have uh, agricultural areas that could be used for agriculture. We don't need to cut trees off, and we can recover most of the of the parts that of the already cleared areas. Our program in Brazil is safe and producing in agriculture with large productivity and the diminishing of CO2 production and deforestation and the production of methane with the meat market production, and this all depends on a strategic point of view. And unfortunately, what we have here is going against the immense potential that Brazil has. If I consider from the hope point of view, as Molon said, the high added value and economic possibilities, the idea of a bioeconomy in Brazil is a reality. And when we gather all the biomedicals and traditional knowledge and the experience we already have, we can create a new product chain and a new chain value for something that is more broad, and we can broaden our economical and political and social possibilities. According to Carlos Nobre, the acai is one of the species from the Amazon that has a broad economical possibility. It already internalizes more income for the Amazon region, more than Vale company, Vale do Rio Doce. They employ around 20,000 people, but the productive chain of açaí employs more than 300,000 people. And within this new pattern, in which we have a distributed process of production possibilities and opportunities of consumption and liquidly and network of production, you have in thousands of fruit trees. I was born and raised in the Amazon, and I know, and I won't make any mistakes here. I know more than 40 species of fruit, highly flavored, not to mention the ones that already have the potential for cosmetics, for example. And I'm talking about the Amazon, but Brazil as a whole has the Pantanal wetlands in Brazil that are on fire. We have the Atlantic forest and other biomes that have to be preserved. And going against the 21st century economy and the industry and transitioning from and on this industry based to a more prosperous and environmental minded with the model of the military dictatorship when they had projects of roads and uh, hydroelectric power plants impacting the forests and impacting the population of original populations. And this has to do with agriculture, non-sustainable, artisanal mining. Brazil has experimented a period in which it was possible to control deforestation. The plan that we had on the deforestation prevention and control within my term as a minister reduced this deforestation by 83% for more than a decade. And this prevented more than 20 tons of CO2 to be emitted in that moment. And with the dismantle of the environmental policies in this term, with the Brazilian Forest Service, and I could name so many organizations and the National Institute for Space Research. This is such a disgrace with so much threat in the Brazilian environment. This government, this term is just irresponsible. Responsible for 1/3 of the forests that have been destructed in the world. My team was responsible from 2004 to 2008. We were responsible for 64% of all the protected areas that were created in the world. This was Brazil then. We were growing. We were growing 3 to 4%, and deforestation was declining. And now we are going the other way. We are in an economic crisis. Oh, and now with the pandemic, it's even worse. And deforestation this year is the worst it is worse than last year, and according to the data we have, data that was recently presented, we had an increase in CO emissions of around 9 to 6% in the first year of Bolsonaro's term, if you compare to 2008 when we were and of course, there is no way we can fulfill the requirements of COP Paris. But I don't have I don't know how much time I have, but I have to end by saying that we have some things that we have to think of. We are not going to have a sustainable development model if we continue to put this 1% out of this more than 200 billion of what we have saved for family agriculture, and other resources for the sustainable agriculture.
We will not be able to have a sustainable development model if we continue considering that sustainable development activities are a concession for this liberal people that might have advantages. This is the agenda for the 21st century. And that's why the policy all around the world is expressing in this sense the possible one of the democrats in the United States will change the balance. The European Union, many efforts that have been done, although insufficient, they have been done. There will be difficulties for the United States with the Congress, but they will push this agenda forward. And the efforts that may be done in each country. France has an important role in this sense in some aspects. And I mention in some aspects because some efforts are less than they should be done all around the world. And in Brazil, we could lead by example. We can be an economically prosperous country as with social justice, fighting structural racism and correcting everything that is being done against the indigenous people, against women, against the Black people, and the young people who are suffering most with the increase of unemployment. We can lead by example, but in Brazil and all around the world, we need to take on a new paradigm, especially in Latin America. And I'll close with that, saying that regardless of the party the governments were from in Latin America, they in their majority, be the parties from the right or left, they saw it, the paradigm was that of the towards development, as if they could change something. We lost audio for a minute, but as if the resources were endless. Now the challenge for humanity is that everybody must focus on sustainability. If you're a socialist, if you're a conservative, you need to focus on sustainability, because we need today to question what has been proposed. I consider myself pro sustainability and progress. I want a prosperous country, but I don't want social injustice with indigenous people, with Black people, women, with anybody. I want a sustainable development model where we can have a new way of producing, consuming, and relate with each other, going away from the idea of having, which is destroying the planet, to paint the best picture, to have the best poetry. We need a new world, a new utopian, this dystopic world we're living in. Even the dystopia of technology, it has to be redirected, resignified to support a world that is socially just and environmentally sustainable. Thank you, Marina Silva. Thank you very much. And I'll pass the floor very quickly to Professor Yann Laurans, who will talk about biodiversity, one of the many topics you touched on.
Yes, thank you very much for giving me the floor to talk about this subject. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for the talks you've been given, Minister Silva and Honorable Member Molon. What I had thought of talking about with you today about civil society and inequalities is also in relation with trade and trade and economy, let's say. And in that respect, I think the question is, of course, very much touching the issue of the EU and Mercosur trade agreement that, of course, you have heard about. It was an agreement the discussion started 20 years ago, and it was concluded, at least a deal was concluded in June 2019. And the provisions of it, I'll come to the subject of inequalities very soon. The provisions of the deal is more or less very important tariff reductions and extension of quotas for agricultural products exported by Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay to the EU, which are beef, poultry, sugar, and honey, and reduction or even suppression, elimination of custom duties on almost everything else, which means more or less opening very much the economies of Mercosur countries, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay, which are among the closest economies in the world today, compared to others, and notably with the EU. And this, of course, is going to be a very important impact if the agreement comes to force one day. That might have a very important impact, which we have to think about and we have to discuss about with the Brazilian civil society. To give you more detail on that very quickly, this agreement has been, of course, very strongly criticized on the European side by civil societies, by NGOs, by parliaments in Luxembourg, in the Netherlands, in Austria, in Ireland, by presidents, the German and the French presidents, and the issue that was raised from the European perspective was, of course, about the policy of Brazil with respect to deforestation, and as it was, attention was attracted by the Amazon fires during the last two winters. But of course, the reaction from the Europeans are also driven by other concerns, such as some protectionism from the farmers, and maybe also a general reluctance of European opinions with respect to globalization. Somehow, part of the Europeans are not tired of let's say, the globalization paradigm, and want to discuss it, and maybe would like to maybe close more or stop opening European economies as much as they used to be. So in that question, what's the relation of this question with the question of today, which is inequalities, is how would opening the economy of Brazil as per this agreement, how would it affect the economy, the society, and the environment of Brazil? And actually, the answer is not straightforward. Of course, you could say, well, opening our economy, on the one hand, you could say it's perfect because it's going to bring purchasing power. It's going to reduce the price and the cost of imported goods from the EU, so you'll be able to buy things cheaper. And it's going to create jobs in that. It's also on the other hand, you can also say, well, it will destroy jobs, because now today we have some protection, strong protection actually in Brazil, to protection against somehow international competition, and lowering this protection might destroy jobs. In between, to be honest, I don't know. I don't know what the effect should be, but what we lack, what we miss, is voices from Brazil, studies, research, and opinions regarding this. How would opening this, for now, very closed economy, how would it affect the Amazon, the Cerrado, the amazing biodiversity and natural resources you have? How would it affect your jobs? for the best or the worse. How, because of course also opening an economy sometimes reducing the rents. Closed economy produce rents for established interests, families that have interest in production, etc. So again, the answer is not straightforward, and Europeans at least do not have enough knowledge of what the Brazilian civil society think about it, and how do they perceive it. Do they prefer just staying at the present conditions, present status, or is some opening of the economy better for inequalities, for jobs, and for the environment? And that's I hope and I think in this of, let's say, hope messages, I think this discussion is going to happen because for now the deal is not accepted by most European powers, including the European Parliament, as it stands, which means that some discussion is going to be reopened. And that's a very interesting opportunity to foster the dialogue between our civil societies, to have a discussion with you, with NGOs, with parliaments, across parliaments, regarding what kind of trade do we want to have to sustain development, to have and to favor the transition to what exactly was said by previous speakers. What kind of trade do you need to support the green transition, the green development that you're calling for? And likewise for the EU, what kind of importations? So on the both sides, it shouldn't be only criticized from the European side, saying, well, we don't want products that are culprits for deforestation in the Amazon. It has to be much broader. It has to be what kind of change in trade we want to favor green development on both sides, which means discussing what today and tomorrow you will import from the EU. For example, do you need to import heavy cars? Do you need to import pesticides that are hazardous for the environment and for the health? Do we need to import beef that would be produced in deforestation in the Amazon or somewhere else, or in Chaco in Argentina, for example? These two questions have to be addressed symmetrically. And so we will need, and I hope this will start soon, to build a position with a good collaboration with the European powers. The European Commission DG Trade, for example, has to be a realistic discussion. We have to make use, of course, of the 20 years of negotiations that have happened. They have not worked in an absurd way. They have built a very cautious position. So we have to use that work and to add some sustainability criteria to this, guarantees and discussion regarding the content of trade we want to have for our economies and for our green economies. I think that's what I would say for now, and of course keep in time and for discussion and answering questions from the rest of the panel and for the audience. Thank you very much.
Não estamos captando o som. We don't have the original audio at the moment. No original audio is available at the moment. Oh, I apologize. I would like to thank Professor Laurans for mentioning this complex relationship between trade and the protection of biodiversity. We see the force of civil society influencing the political agenda, considering this agreement between the Mercosur and the European Union. Right now, we are going to have questions from the audience. We don't have a lot of time for that, but I'm going to open up the first questions from the audience. And the first one is for Alessandro Malone. What are the perspectives for the fulfillment of the Agreement of Paris after the impact caused by the fires this year? This question comes from Camila Luz. Well, the Brazilian situation, Camila, is worrisome because first we live in a government that is negationist and denies reality. For example, recently with the drama of the fires in the Amazon and in Pantanal, the president and with some authorities decided to fly over those areas just to show that this is not as bad. But this is the situation we live in Brazil, and I am concerned with the fulfillment of the goals, of the Brazilian goals, and I do not see up until today a change in path for the Brazilian government. We are going to have some pressure with the new government from the United States into Brazil, and this is going to force Brazil to make some changes. We see the deposition of the anti-minister Salles, because if it depends on the government itself, this is not going to happen. We also see an internal pressure within the House of Representatives, not only by us who are environmentalists. We see people from the agribusiness that are putting some pressure on what is going on because they see that they are going to have harm on their trade agreements because they will stop being able to sell overseas. And the image that Brazil has of outside is bad, and it can bring harm to the trade. And the agribusiness side of the House of Representatives is starting to become discomforted with what the government has been doing. Of course, I am also concerned with the fulfillment of our goals, but I see that this middle of everything that was built by Marina Silva with a lot of work, and then Carlos Mink and the others that came before and after. This is a more than decades of work with control, and this is all being dismantled. This is exactly what Marina presented, is that point of view that was considering the environment as an obstacle for development. That is a dictatorship point of view, an old point of view from Brazil that is still presiding the government actions now. But I have hope that this is going to change due to internal pressure. Thank you, Deputy Molon. Now I'll ask Marina Silva. A question is from Melissa Lins. The way the environmental protection is designed and the Constitution of '88 and the federation model ends up harming the environmental protection. Do you believe that? Thank you for the question. I would say that if there is one thing that Brazil has, is one excellent environmental law from my point of view. This is a country that has the Article 225 in the Constitution that ensures Brazilians having the right for a healthy environment, and this would be translated into infra-constitutional legislation. We have the national environmental system, and this is a result of this perception, Article 225. We have a national system of conservation unit. We have a national water resource institution. We are considering the law number 6,9938 from 1981, and this ensures that the system is in place. The problem for Brazil is the resistance of those who do not want to fulfill the law because they think that the environment is a barrier for development. They have not understood that we need to join ecology and economy, and they want to get back of the beginning of the 20th century sort of economy, and this is not possible because the this is going to be bad for Brazil. We have great legislation, of course. This can also be improved, but the attempts in the House of Representatives is about changing the indigenous land related legislation, and they don't want to recognize the areas that were not delimited after the Constitution of 88. The bill that wants to regulate the areas in the Amazon that have been illegally occupied, um, awarding people who have taken land from the state, and they are going to even have a definite document, the dismantling of the legal concern on conservation and the autonomy of public agents so that they can fulfill their duties, the weakening of public budget. IBAMA has much lower resources to work on Brazil than before. If compared to the actions of the vice president, and this is not bringing any results to the Amazon, and the dismantling is outrageous, and the attempt of changing legislation. What we need is an implementation project for this term. And as Deputy Molon said, the agribusiness businessmen, they have signed a letter to the House of Representatives and to the President asking for the fulfillment of the laws. 17 former ministers of economy and the central bank, they say that the path is for sustainability. We have some hard time to understand this agenda. I am going to be very brief. And considering what Professor Laurans said about the Mercosul, there is a debate regarding the Mercosul in Brazil that includes academia and civil society and public agents, in the sense that the agreement cannot be fulfilled without including environmental clauses. It's a two-way agreement, of course, including interests of the European Union and our interests. We have a base of the government that thinks that is going to be carrying out predatory livestock trade and logging trade to create market in Europe to acquire this sort of product, because we would be exporting deforestation and violence, and this means we would have to import that things from them. We need socially fair bases, but we also need them to be environmentally sustainable, because there is no use if we have more conditions for export if we are harming our own economy. We are a powerful agribusiness country, and we are a water power because we produce the water, because we have that forest. And Brazil would be uh, in prejudice. We'd have a severe drought if we didn't have the Amazon, and this is what is happening in Pantanal wasteland, Brazilian wasteland. What we produce in Brazil alone, if we, with the sun and the wind and the forest, we would need 50 Itaipu hydroelectric plants to pump energy. Just to have a comparison, we would destroy the best resource we have. We need to look into the agreement. We need sustainability clauses, because we need to make sure we are transitioning from selling products that are not sustainable into producing sustainable products with the protections of indigenous people as well. Thank you, Marina Silva. I have one question now to Professor Laurans, and this question comes from Pierre Silufo. How is the foreign pressure reconfigure the situation of the environment in Amazon, and how is this useful? How are these pressures useful for that redesign?
Thank you, Pierre, for this very interesting question. I think it's a difficult question. I guess the positive side of it would be that exactly as was said by my two co-panelists, pressure from the EU market, which is a very interesting market for Brazilian exporters because it's very well remunerating. Pressure from that, asking for guarantees on the way meat is produced, could have an impact on, let's say, forcing redirection of the meat industry to other trajectories than previously. That is using more the land that is already devoted to cattle breeding and stopping the expansion of agriculture. It's absolutely possible. It's not a technical issue. I mean, Brazil has by far the capacity to increase its production without any 1 hectare more of use of the Amazon or the Cerrado. By just using better its already available resources. So in that case, pressure from the market, from the European opinion and the market can be of use, and in supporting the part of the farming system in Brazil that actually want to deliver a sustainable product, which of course exists and hopefully is the majority. So we have to support them by favoring these guys and not favoring the others, those that produce products at the expense of the indigenous people, the Amazon, and the public land. But of course, on the other hand, there is an issue of in some kind of interference from foreign policies that would actually impose a European mindset and way of things that would be imposed on Brazilian authorities and business, which shouldn't be the case, of course. It should be it should come from the Brazilian society, from the Brazilian producers, and it could be with support from both sides, and from both sides, and from the European powers and civil society and market. And of course, it has to be symmetrical like that. And it's very important that the idea is not to say you don't have any rights to do what you want with your natural resources. The only thing is to say we just want to make sure that what we are going to import is produced legally on the basis that you have defined with your forestry code, with your law, with your constitution, and that we are not responsible for importing things that someone has produced illegally in your country. In that case, I think some pressure is of course very useful from all sides, not only from the EU to Brazil, from international markets in general. The better the guarantees are asked for doing trade, the better the development, sustainable development will happen.
Thank you, Professor Laurans. We are now going to have a very short time for final considerations from each one of you, from each participant.
The idea of Conférence Brésil is to bring new ideas on these issues. So if you want to share uh, ideas for material for reading for our audience, this would be very welcome. I'd like to give the word to Alessandro Malone. I really want to thank you for the invitation, for the honor of participating in this debate with Minister Marina Silva, with Professor Laurans. Thank you for your mediation. I think this pandemic has made us rethink our life, our habits, and the path the world is following. It's as if nature had given us a warning. And I think it's time we open our ears to that uh, advice. So when it ends, we won't go back to the old normal that brought us to this point. In Hong Kong, I saw a sign that says we can't go back to normal because normal is the problem. It's the old normal that brought us to this point. So we have to think how to build a new normal, not a new normal with people are distant and only see each other through the screen on their computer like we're doing today. Although without this technology, we wouldn't be able to debate with people on the other side of the world in France and all that. But we have to learn how to retake this economy, rethink it in a way that it joins, uh, return to a green economy with social justice, developing economies, innovation, science, in a way we can protect the environment and reduce inequality. To give a single example, since we are in our final considerations, trying to face the habitation deficit, the lack of housing our people suffer with the building of sustainable homes that will use the water from the rain, that use solar energy with an architecture that require less use of air conditioning equipment or things like that. So the challenge of reducing inequalities with a perspective of a sustainable development. This is possible. Brazil could lead this initiative, formulating a project for a new Green Deal, a new economy, a green economy. Many good things have been done in the past. Minister Marina Silva was responsible for many of this. We have traced a very good path in the past. And we need to contemplate a future that addresses our both needs, protecting the Brazilian environment and reducing social inequalities. These two things need and must go together. Thank you, Science Po, our students and alumni, Professor Lohan, Marina Silva, and Ana Peliz for the questions. Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Alessandro Molon. I'll pass the words for final considerations by Marina Silva. Once again, thank you very much for the invitation. Congratulations on your initiative. This idea of putting the social issues in a systematic, integrated manner with the environmental issue is very necessary and proper at this time. I'm very happy the idea of a social environmental concept. It is an experience all over the world, although even if you don't talk too much about that, I'm glad to say that this was a contribution from Brazil, especially by Chico Mendes in the Amazon and the state of Acre. I had the opportunity of live with him, know him personally since I was 17 until he died. We cannot treat the environmental issues as something external when you debate economy or other social or other issues. Things are interconnected. If you talked about a book, there's a book that was published a long time ago. It was organized by Professor Viriato from the University of Lisbon at the time, called Ambiente na Encruzilhada, Environment at a Crossroads. Although there are many articles about that, he mentioned some issues that I consider very interesting for us to think about. Another thing that is always current and is something I really like to lead, the philosopher that says about the human condition. She mentions two very important things. We have a lot of difficulty in living with the unpredictable. It brings us dizziness. We have a lot of difficulty with the unpredictable. And for the unpredictable, there's only one possibility of, so we don't fall on the vacuum. It's the value of the promise, but it has a promise that you can it has to be a promise that you can believe in, and you can believe in a change in the development model. The first essay on climate change was written by Aranhos in 1896, and it already said that we would get to the point we are at now. This warning was given since then, and we cannot today put on risk the possibility of the continuation of life on Earth. So we have to commit and compromise to that promise. Most of the technical answers have already been given. What we need is an ethical commitment, a political commitment to put these ideas in practice, especially in the rich countries, helping the developing countries so they can also participate in this effort and not having to repeat the same mistakes of those who were responsible for many of the emissions that caused this problem. Thank you very much, and once again, congratulations on the initiative. Thank you.
I've been very honored to talk to and with this panel, and I'd like to what I'd like to say in conclusion is that I think this moment that we are living now, with the on the one hand the pandemic that is very probably a number one in a series of global health issues that we are going to experience in the next decades. And second, the change in the general opinion globally regarding the benefits of globalization and how it has to be put under criticism. These two events hopefully are going to take us to a shift from a discussion that is only about protecting economic interests and jobs and buying things as cheap as possible, to a discussion that has to be shared and collaborative regarding what is the best way to exchange in support of sustainable development on all sides of the oceans, countries, etc. It has to be. We have to open a new moment, a new general discussion and conversation, let's say, across all types of actors, countries, regarding what is the exchange, trade exchange, but also other types of exchange that we want to actually support this green transition that was discussed today, and that will help use our natural resources everywhere and reduce inequalities in the same time. Thank you again very much. It was a real pleasure and honor to share the panel with such distinguished speakers, and thank you for the moderation.
Thank you, Professor Laurans. I would like to, in the name of the conference, to thank you all for your participation. Thank you for sharing all this experience, your thoughts, and also the mission of activating hope on sustainable development. I thank you. I gave you this challenge and you really taken it with honor. I also want to thank the audience who participated for the questions you sent that enriched our debate so much. And I want to thank a lot the conference for giving me the opportunity to be here and participating in this panel. Thank you very much.